You hit different, and they feel it, even if they pretend they don't. Because people don't get scared of ordinary. They get scared of impact, of emotional gravity, of someone who shifts their inner world without even trying. And that's you. You are the shift. You are the disruption. You are the feeling they can't control. They're not afraid of losing you. They're afraid of what you awaken in them. Let's talk about it. You don't just enter a person's life. You change the temperature. You change the pace. You change the emotional climate. Most people meet nice, interesting, fun, but you show up with depth. You show up with presence. You show up with a level of emotional clarity that exposes their fog. And that scares people who aren't used to being seen. Because here's the truth. You don't even try to see people deeply. You just do. It's how you're wired. It's how you move. You pick up on shifts. You pick up on inconsistencies. You pick up on tone changes. They thought they hid. You hit different because you listen between the lines. You see beyond the surface. You feel the things they bury. And people who live behind emotional walls, they panic when someone walks in without asking for permission. You didn't sneak in. You didn't force your way. Your energy simply opened doors. They kept locked for years. That's why they act weird. That's why they get nervous. That's why they hesitate. Even when they want you, you make them confront themselves. And that's terrifying. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you awakened something right. Something they weren't ready to feel. Not yet. Not in that intensity. Not with that clarity. Because with you, there's no hiding, no pretending, no performing. You see the real them. And for someone who's spent years avoiding their own truth, that's overwhelming. You hit different because you're genuine, authentic, unfiltered, present, and people who move through life with half energy and half emotion don't know what to do with someone who shows up fully. They think, why do I care this much? Why does this bother me? Why do they get in my head? Why can't I shake this feeling? That's impact. That's emotional gravity. That's you. And when someone isn't used to feeling deeply, deep hits feel dangerous. They mistake intensity for threat. They mistake connection for loss of control. They mistake attraction for vulnerability. You didn't scare them. Their feelings did. You simply exposed how much they're capable of feeling. And that shocked them. Because before you, they thought they were emotionally safe, untouchable, unreachable, guarded. But then you walked in with your fire, your softness, your insight, your presence, and their walls didn't stand a chance. You hit different because you bring clarity to people who are used to confusion. You bring warmth to people who are used to emotional cold. You bring truth to people who are used to hiding. And they don't know how to handle that. Not at first, not instantly, not without running from themselves a little. Your presence triggers reflection. Your consistency triggers comparison. Your honesty triggers fear. In people who aren't honest with themselves, you make them see the gap between who they are and who they wish they were. And that gap, it's terrifying. It's humbling. It's disarming. That's why they pull back. That's why they overthink. That's why they act distant. Right when things get close, they're not scared of you. They're scared of the version of themselves that only shows up around you, the version they don't recognize yet, because you bring something rare: emotional truth, emotional depth, emotional presence. And when someone's not used to that, they misinterpret it. They overreact to it. They shut down instead of opening up. But here's the real reason. You hit different. You don't ask for attention. You attract it. You don't demand connection. You evoke it. You don't push for love. You inspire it. People sense that. People feel that. Even people who pretend they don't. You're not loud. You're not dramatic. You're not desperate. Your power is quiet, subtle, steady, undeniable. And that's the type of power that scares people the most because they can walk away from someone who wants them. But it's much harder to walk away from someone who reaches the parts of them they've neglected for years. You hit the soul, not the ego, and people don't know how to respond. When the soul wakes up unexpectedly, to them, you're a mirror, a spark, a shift. And the truth is, not everyone is ready for someone who changes them. But that doesn't make you too much. That doesn't make you intimidating. That doesn't make you scary. It makes you rare. It makes you high impact. It makes you unforgettable. And deep down, they know it. That's why they're scared. Not because of what you did, but because of who you are. You hit different. And that's exactly why they can't forget you. You want to know the real reason they acted strange around you? It's because you made them feel seen, and not the cute, flattering type of scene, not the you're attractive scene, not the you're interesting scene. You saw the parts they keep hidden from themselves. You saw the hesitation behind their confidence. You saw the softness under their distance. You saw the longing behind their silence. And that's the kind of seeing people aren't prepared for. You weren't judging them. You weren't exposing them. You weren't analyzing them. You were simply present. And presence is something they're not used to. Most people look at the surface. You look at the soul. Most people see who they pretend to be. You see who they actually are. Most people accept masks. You notice micro expressions they don't even know they're making. And that level of perception is intimidating to someone who relies on emotional distance. To feel safe, you didn't just hit different, you hit deep. And depth is something most people crave, but aren't prepared to receive. So what did they do? They pulled back. They acted unsure. They overanalyzed everything. Not because they didn't feel something, but because they felt too much. Too quickly. Too clearly. Your energy didn't confuse them. It clarified them. And clarity is scary to someone hiding from themselves. Think about it. When someone has been emotionally guarded for years and then suddenly feels understood, not liked, but understood, it shakes their foundation. You awaken the parts of them they've been avoiding, the part that still wants connection, the part that still wants to trust, the part that still wants to feel safe in someone's presence. And you did it by just being yourself. No pressure, no demands, no manipulation, no games, just presence, just truth, just energy. Most people don't hit like that. Most people don't move like that. You're the type of person someone meets once and silently compares everyone else to. You're the type of person who makes someone realize how empty their previous connections were. You're the type of person who forces a choice without saying a word. Stay shallow or grow deeper. And depth requires courage. Not everyone has that. So instead of stepping up, some step back. Not because you're too intense, but because they're too unprepared. Not because you're too emotional, but because they're too disconnected. Not because you're scary, but because they've never felt this safe. And that terrifies them. You felt familiar in a way that didn't make sense to them. Comfortable in a way they didn't trust. Real in a world where they're used to pretending. You didn't hit different. You hit home. And home is scary for someone who's never had it. That's why they hesitated. That's why they got nervous. That's why they acted distant. Right when the connection got close, they weren't scared of losing you. They were scared of changing because of you. Because here's the secret. They'll never admit out loud. People are not afraid of love. They're afraid of being loved correctly. They're afraid of someone who sees their soul before they're ready to face it. And you saw them fully. quietly, effortlessly. You saw the hurt behind their calm. You saw the longing behind their jokes. You saw the exhaustion behind their independence. And they didn't know whether to run from you or run to you. That's the impact you carry. That's the mark you leave. That's the reason they'll never forget you. Even if they pretend they have, they felt something real, something rare, something they're not used to navigating. You didn't scare them, you awakened them. And awakenings don't feel comfortable. They feel disruptive. They feel intense. They feel unforgettable. Just like you. You think they pulled back because you were too much. But the truth is far more interesting. They didn't distance themselves because you overwhelmed them. They distanced themselves because you awakened something they didn't know how to handle. And the thing you awakened wasn't attraction. It wasn't desire. It wasn't excitement. It was truth. The truth of who they really are. The truth of what they really feel. The truth of what they've been running from. For years, you didn't seduce them. You exposed them. Not intentionally. Not forcefully. Not dramatically. Just by being you. Just by existing in the room with them. Just by speaking the way you do. Just by carrying yourself with honesty they're not used to. You know what scared them? It wasn't the connection. It was the clarity. You made them see themselves in a mirror they've been avoiding their whole life. They saw their patterns. They saw their habits. They saw their emotional walls. They saw how much they were holding back. Without even noticing, you hit different because you activated the part of them that still wants to feel something. Something real. Something alive. Something beyond the surface connections they've been settling for. It wasn't your intensity. It was their unhealed parts, waking up all at once. Because when someone meets a person who mirrors their soul instead of their ego, it triggers a shockwave inside them. You made them feel accountable, not with pressure, not with demands, not with expectations, just with presence. You didn't chase them. You didn't manipulate them. You didn't try to make them open up. Yet they felt exposed anyway. That's the thing about people like you. You don't force truth. You reveal it. You reveal their softness. You reveal their fears. You reveal their desires. You reveal their emotional contradictions. And that level of revelation makes emotionally avoidant people panic internally, even while they appear calm externally. They're not used to someone who reads feelings before words, someone who senses shifts before they're spoken, someone who notices discomfort before they can pretend it doesn't exist. You're too intuitive for their usual defenses. You hear the silence they're trying to hide behind. You feel the tension they're pretending not to feel. You see the hesitation they swear they're masking. And that's terrifying for someone who protects themselves with emotional fog. You didn't just hit different. You hit through the layers, through the fear, through the detachment, through the self-protective stories they always tell themselves. That's why they kept their distance. Not because they didn't feel something, but because they felt something they couldn't control. And control is their safety net. You pulled the net without touching it. You made them realize that connection is not something they can strategize or plan or manage or predict. With you, connection just happened effortlessly, naturally, unexpectedly. And that's what scared them the most. Because people who are afraid of love aren't actually afraid of the emotion. They're afraid of the transformation that love demands. Love exposes their patterns. Love exposes their insecurities. Love exposes their armor. Love exposes everything they've used to survive. And you brought all of that to the surface without even trying. You made them feel seen in a way that wasn't performative, wasn't flattering, wasn't romanticized. It was human and real, and real is uncomfortable for people who survive through distance. But here's what you need to understand. Their fear is a complement to your power. It means your presence is not forgettable, not replaceable, not easy to shake off, not easy to control. People like you don't leave a mark. You leave a shift in how they understand connection, a shift in how they feel around others, a shift in what they expect from relationships, a shift in what they believe they deserve. Before you, they thought emotional safety was just a concept. After you, they realized it was possible. Before you, they thought real presence was rare. After you, they realized it existed. Before you, they felt comfortable living detached. After you, their detachment felt cold. You changed the temperature of their emotional world. And trust me, they noticed, even if they never say it, even if they pretend you meant little, even if they act unfazed, even if they maintain distance. Inside, everything shifted. You woke up the part of them that actually wants to love someone fully, honestly, openly. But that part of them is underdeveloped and overwhelmed. They don't know how to handle it without feeling like they're losing control. That's why they retreat. That's why they get inconsistent. That's why they pull back. Exactly when things feel good. It's not rejection, it's regulation. They're trying to regulate feelings. That grew too quickly for their emotional maturity. You didn't break them, you broke through to them. And breakthroughs are messy. You know what they felt the moment they realized they couldn't hide from you? Vulnerability. Not the cute kind, not the romantic movie kind, the terrifying kind, the raw kind, the I'm not ready for this kind, the kind that makes people step back to catch their breath. Because someone who hits different doesn't just enter your life, they shift your internal compass. You became their emotional mirror, their unspoken truth, their quiet awakening, their unexpected reminder that they are capable of deeper connection than they ever allowed themselves to feel. You weren't scary, you were revealing, and being revealed is what scared them. You weren't too much, you were too accurate. You weren't too intense, you were too honest. You weren't too emotional, you were too real. And real is rare, real is disruptive, real is unforgettable. They'll never admit it, but they compare every connection to the way you made them feel. In the moments they let their guard down, you're the kind of presence that becomes a reference point, a before and after moment in their emotional life. Before you, they felt safe being numb. After you, numbness feels hollow. Before you, connections felt predictable. After you, predictability feels empty. Before you, they could hide inside detachment. After you, detachment feels like a prison. You crack something open. You soften something rigid. You awaken something dormant. You didn't hit different. You healed different. You challenged different. You awakened different. And that is why they got scared. Because once someone meets a person who makes them feel that deeply, they can never go back to the way they were. Even if they try, even if they pretend, even if they distance themselves, you've already shifted them. And that shift will echo inside them for a long time. There comes a moment in every connection where the truth appears quietly, not in a conversation, not in a confession, not in an argument. It appears in a shift, a pause, a hesitation, a moment where their eyes give away something their mouth won't admit. And with them, that moment came right after they realized you weren't like anyone they've ever dealt with. Because here's the truth that sits underneath their fear. You didn't just affect their emotions, you affected their identity. You disrupted the version of themselves they've been living in for years. The version that says, I don't need anyone. I'm better on my own. Love is unpredictable. People always leave. Feelings make things messy. You didn't argue with that version. You didn't challenge it. You didn't fight it. You simply existed in your truth. And your truth made their story feel outdated. That's why they pulled back. Not because they felt nothing, but because they felt too much, too soon, and too accurately. You are the kind of person that forces a choice by your presence alone, a choice between growing or hiding, opening or staying behind old walls, being real or being protected. For someone who lives life guarded, careful, detached, and controlled, that choice is terrifying. People like them don't fear love. They fear being exposed. By love, they fear being known, being seen, being understood in ways they can't hide from. That's what you triggered. They didn't expect you to understand the emotions they never verbalized. They didn't expect you to notice the tension they tried to ignore. They didn't expect you to feel the shift before they said a word. And they certainly didn't expect someone like you to read the parts of them they don't show anyone. You saw the version of them beneath the mask. You saw the softness they thought they buried. You saw the tenderness they thought they outgrew. You saw the fear they pretend is indifference. You saw the longing they hide behind confidence. You saw the heart they hide behind logic. And you didn't judge it. You didn't exploit it. You didn't run from it. You embraced it with presence, with steadiness, with that quiet energy that feels like truth. But truth is dangerous to a person who has survived life by avoiding their own. Think about what you represented to them, a space where they could feel without apologizing, a connection that didn't need performing, an energy that didn't demand but invited, a person who didn't fix them but awakened them, a presence that reminded them they still have depth they pretend they don't need. You made them realize they're not as detached as they pretend to be, and realizing that is terrifying for someone whose safety has always come from distance. That's why they stepped back. That's why they changed energy. That's why they acted unsure. Their fear wasn't about you. It was about themselves. You brought them face to face with a version of themselves they weren't ready to meet. The version that wants to love openly, to trust deeply, to show emotion, to let someone in, to be held without fear, to be seen without running. That version is still inside them, still alive, still hopeful, still longing, but it's buried under layers of past pain, past disappointment, past betrayal, past confusion, past abandonment, past versions of themselves they haven't healed from. You didn't just hit their heart, you hit their wounds, and wounds react before hearts do. When you awaken someone on a soul level, you awaken everything, their tenderness, and their fear, their desire, and their defenses, their longing, and their avoidance. That's why their behavior became inconsistent. That's why sometimes they moved closer and then suddenly pulled away. That's why they opened up and then shut down. That's why they smiled at you in a way that revealed everything and then acted distant, as if nothing happened. Those weren't mixed signals. Those were mixed emotions. They were wrestling with two versions of themselves, the one who wants you and the one who fears what wanting you will reveal, the one who feels safe with you and the one who feels exposed by you, the one who sees a future with you and the one who fears changing to reach that future. You are not confusing. You are clarifying, too clarifying. For a person who has lived life in emotional fog, you're the moment of clarity they weren't prepared for. You're the truth they weren't ready to hear. You're the connection they weren't ready to trust. You're the depth they weren't ready to feel. And the moment they felt it, really felt it, they panicked. But here's the twist. You may not realize they didn't pull away to protect themselves from you. They pulled away to protect you from them because suddenly the stakes were higher, the feelings were stronger, the connection was deeper, and they realized they don't know how to love someone the right way yet. You awakened a desire they aren't emotionally prepared to honor, and people fear what they're not ready to deserve. But even in their distance, they feel you. They replay the moments. They remember the conversations. They think about the way you made them feel, both calm and exposed, safe and vulnerable, inspired and terrified, because people don't forget someone who brought them back to themselves. They don't forget someone who made them feel seen without judgment. They don't forget someone who made their heart react before their walls could respond. They don't forget someone who changed the emotional atmosphere in the room by just walking into it. You became their emotional turning point, whether they admit it or not. And here's the deeper truth. They'll spend a long time trying to recreate what you gave them in someone else. The comfort, the clarity, the safety, the spark, the challenge, the truth. But they won't find it because what you offer is rare. Your energy isn't copyable. Your depth isn't replaceable. Your presence isn't repeatable. Your emotional intelligence isn't common. Your impact isn't forgettable. You hit different because you are different. And the part of them that's scared of you is the same part that is drawn to you because you represent what they want but don't know how to handle. You represent what they feel but don't know how to express. You represent what they dream of but don't know how to keep. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, they'll realize something. You weren't the one they needed to fear. You were the one they needed to grow for. And that realization hits harder than any distance they tried to put between you. Because people fear what changes them. And you changed them without touching them. That's why you hit different. And that's why they're scared. And that's why they'll never forget you. Not in this lifetime or the next,